A big criticism of Apex has been cheaters in the game. But recently, Respawn have been making efforts to stop these cheaters, and thanks to Respawn for the opportunity, I just got to hear about and ask Respawn about some new anti-cheat stuff, and also their progress fighting against strike packs. But first, let's take a look at this new sheet they gave us, because it gives us cool information, like the total amount of bans last season. But to understand the sheet Respawn gave us, which you'll want to understand because it's kind of crazy, you have to understand mainly this term. Respawn have a term called match infection rate, which is the percentage of matches in which at least one player was reported 3 or more times and banned for cheating within the last 14 days. So roughly the percentage of matches which had a cheater in them. And bear in mind, most Apex matches have 60 players. So now you know what this stat means, we can officially see how more likely you are to see a cheater in PC than console. And it turns out you're way more likely. For example, at Season 25 launch, the ranked match infection rate on console was only 0.2, while over on PC, it was a whole 6.1, which is 30 times higher. Us boys on PC have it hard. But also, just in the first half of Season 25, Respawn did manage to ban 61,000 people, which is insane. And in the second half of Season 25, they managed to ban 57,000 people. In this sheet, there are some standout seasons as well. The one that jumps out to me immediately is Season 23. Season 23 was definitely a bumpy ride, because on Season 23 launch, Respawn had the most bans on this whole sheet, with 115,000 bans, while in the second half of the season, they had the second most bans with 84,000 bans, and a match infection rate of 10.2%, which is pretty heavy. Luckily, since then, the match infection rate has gone down, and it seems to be at relatively good levels, and we do have to consider that this sheet is showing the ranked match infection rate, and when I talked to Respawn, they said, on average, ranked has a higher match infection rate than pubs. So if you're just playing wildcard or pubs every day, in reality, you're probably not going to have cheaters in 7% of your games, but if you play pred games every day, well, the percentage will probably be higher. And if you're on console, apparently you're just chilling. Although that's not to say cheaters don't exist on console. In fact, loads of console users use a device called a strike pack, which is basically a device that you can plug into your controller that will eliminate all recoil from your weapons. These are super rampant in console, and they're really hard for Apex to detect because of the nature of how they function. Luckily, Respawn said they are aware of this, and some of their recent focuses, in their words, have been aimbots and anti-recoil. Respawn said detection in this area is a critical area of focus for us, and we're developing in-house gameplay detection models for aimbots and anti-recoil devices. And this is definitely true. There was a pretty crazy tweet from an Apex dev a few months ago where he had tons of strike pack devices where he was clearly trying to reverse engineer them to figure out how to ban them from Apex, which was pretty cool. And I have to give it to Respawn, they are trying with strike packs, and I really hope we see some solid anti-strike pack action soon, because I think it's undeniable that most of us watching this video have been killed by a strike pack. On a good note though, that wouldn't be the only in-house anti-cheating thing Respawn are developing for Apex, as Respawn also went on to say, we launched a new system in Season 23 that assists our actions against bad performers by analysing various types of unfair play to each player based on gameplay indicators. It's adaptable and will evolve as new variants of cheating are introduced. Looking forward, we're hoping to expand these efforts to include input manipulation and anti-recoil, which are strike packs. So it seems Respawn have created some sort of maybe AI anti-cheat detection that they are now utilising to ban cheaters in Apex. And like they said, they did launch this system in Season 23, which might explain why Season 23 had so many bans and cheater detections, because they were able to detect the cheaters who had been secretly cheating this whole time. Although that's just a theory, Respawn didn't say that to us. They're being kind of deliberately vague on these systems they're making, so cheaters can't find out ways to get around them, which is fair enough, you know? I believe this new anti-cheat system they've launched does seem to be kind of all-encompassing. As Respawn said, since the last time they talked about combating teamers in Apex, they continued to improve the model over time and observed a further drop-in of report rates by around 33% compared to February. So because there are less teamers that have been detected by this new detection system, there are less reports, which is pretty cool. The same on third-party bots, which were plaguing the game a year or two ago, Respawn have managed to create tools to detect and remove bot farms and further train their additional tool for future detections. This is absolutely awesome. And regarding cheating, I did manage to ask Respawn some questions because it's an interesting topic, and one question I wanted to ask Respawn was about how the report system priority works, as I wanted to learn about the system of reporting. Like, when you report somebody, does that report get put into a queue that will get manually reviewed? And if somebody's reported multiple times, will that reported player's account become more of a priority to look at? And I did get an answer saying many accounts have just one report, so reports are kind of crowdsourced. Usually, if one player's account gets reported loads of times within like a 15-minute window, those reports will become a priority to review for the anti-cheat team, because obviously this player's doing something a bit suspicious. And if someone only gets like one report every 2 months, they're not really going to be a mega priority to review. But if that player suddenly got 20 reports in one day, they would become a priority. And also, from my understanding, report priority can be affected by account level and other account factors. So I would imagine on Apex's end, if they get like 20 reports for a level 1 hacking and then 20 reports for a guy who plays every single day hacking, they're probably more likely to look at the level 1 hacking first, because they are more likely to be hacking, which is really interesting. So your reports do matter, especially if someone's blatantly hacking. Just report them because they are more likely to be seen by the Apex team. I also had to ask the Apex team a question about Battlefield 6, relating to Apex though, because I noticed when I played the Battlefield 6 beta that it was using a strange anti-cheat. It was using EA's own anti-cheat, which I didn't know existed. This anti-cheat is called Javelin anti-cheat, and it was even featured in the Battlefield 6 trailer, and there were many reports that it was working well, and it detected hundreds and thousands of cheats during the Battlefield 6 beta. So I had to ask, is this anti-cheat ever going to make its way to Apex? Because it does seem like a pretty powerful anti-cheat, especially with the permissions it requires. Because if you're not aware, Apex doesn't use the EA Javelin anti-cheat, it uses Easy anti-cheat, which is made by a separate company. And the Apex team said to me, the EA anti-cheat is in discussion, but the thing is, Easy anti-cheat has a long relationship with Apex and the Respawn team, and there's a large mutual understanding just generally of Apex. So with all the work they've done with EAC, EA does seem a bit cautious about potentially being forced to take a step back to add this new tech. But at the same time, EA anti-cheat is in discussion. And to be fair, I guess this makes sense. I'm not really a very knowledgeable person about anti-cheat or even software, but I would imagine that EAC is pretty well integrated within Apex and its systems and its flags, and to change the anti-cheat over, it will probably be a rough transition to a new anti-cheat because they'll have to make sure it works just as well as EAC did. Still, it will be interesting to see if we do get EA's own anti-cheat in Apex, because it clearly does work fairly well. Honestly, I do think Apex are taking many steps in the right direction with the anti-cheat, and all this new detection stuff they are setting up is clearly working to some degree, considering that the season they added the new detection stuff, they had over 100,000 bans in half a season. It's kind of crazy to look at from the outside in, because anti-cheat and cheaters are always going to be in a war with each other. Game and anti-cheat devs are always going to be trying to one-up the cheaters, and the cheaters are always going to be trying to one-up and find ways to get around these anti-cheats and game developers. And from what it looks like, the new detection system in Apex definitely uses like some clever AI to kind of recognize patterns of cheaters and look out for them. So maybe the future of anti-cheat is kind of just having an AI that can detect behaviors that aren't of a normal player. And I guess to some degree, it's working. I'm really excited to see the future of anti-cheat in Apex, and I'm really glad that Respawn are taking steps forward and not idly sitting by. But thank you so much to the Apex team for letting me ask you silly questions. And if you want more videos like this, subscribe.